Hello, Peter4790 or Cyrus here, and welcome to my review of Alice Madness Returns. With all the RPGs I've been playing in the past month in 2012, Tales of Grace's Elf, Atelier Meruru, Mass Effect 3, etc., I thought I would take a little break from the RPG goodness and play a few different games, and I picked up Alice Madness Returns. Mostly because I was initially interested in it when it came out, but wasn't sure if I would like it. But then the Steam sale came out and I knew I had to give the game a try. And after playing through the game, I would like to give my opinion on it. Alice Madness Returns is a psychological horror / action platformer that's developed by Spicy Horse and published by Electronic Arts. Graphically, Alice Madness Returns look fantastic. Now I'm playing on a PC version, but I have to say the game is a marvel to look at. And I have to compliment the physics effect that is in this game, as the particle effects in this game are phenomenal, such as the dust, the gears that dislodge as you hit some certain types of enemies, etc. And now I'm more in the mid physics effect on a computer, so it's very impressive. And the art style is phenomenal as well, as each chapter got their own unique environment that Alice traverses through, and they're stunning to look at. From the slums of London to a surreal area that is Hatter's domain, each level looked visually stunning, and I have to heavily praise the game's art style, as it really gives the game much life when you're playing through the game. The story is great as well, and got me very interested in it within the second chapter of the game. The story continues from the first game, where Alice is now out of the ward and into the care of Dr. Bumby, who tries to cure her by getting her to forget the memory of the fire that took her home and family away from her. But the memory still haunts her, which pushes her subconscious into Wonderland once again. But all is not well in Wonderland, as some kind of corruption takes over, which threatens to destroy Wonderland. Overall, the story was very unique and was able to compel me pretty quickly, and I was able to get a good grasp of the story, even though I haven't played the first game. Though there is a short summary of what happened in the first game in the extra content option in the main menu, and I have to add that the ending of the game is very interesting. So yeah, I leave it at that. The characters are also pretty good, and I found Alice to be an interesting protagonist as she traverses Wonderland in the hopes of destroying the corruption. I also like the cashier cat, as he gives quite amusing hints to Alice while I was progressing the game. Music is good and matches the tone of the game overall, and not one track was misused in the game. Voice acting is solid, and I kind of like how Alice's dress changes as you go through each individual chapter. It gives each chapter that unique feeling to it. Overall, Alice Madness Returns got a fantastic presentation with great story, fantastic art style, good characters, good soundtrack, and solid voice acting. Alice Madness Returns is mostly an action platform at its core. As you progress the game, Alice will receive items that will help her both in combat and her ability to platform across the stages, such as getting a pepper grinder to shoot pig snots, which will unveil secret passages, or shrinking so you could fit through the keyholes, or see invisible platforms, etc. Alice herself got great jumping abilities before being able to triple jump, which I find to be pretty unique, to be honest, and her ability to float will be key in traversing through the dangerous world of Wonderland. Overall, the platforming in the game is overall pretty simple. The levels themselves will get you to use all the items in your arsenal to get through the game, which is pretty good on its own. Though, Alice Madness Returns suffer from one key area that a platformer need to have: the level design. Alice Madness Returns art style makes each level look pretty unique from each other, but when you're playing through the game doesn't really change. Sure, you get different weapons which you have to utilize later on in the game, but those weapons doesn't really change the core mechanics of the platforming, as the obstacles are usually something Alice will have to smash through. So, from the first level to the last, the platform doesn't really change, which will make playing through the game a bit repetitive, which is kind of a shame with how the art style gave each stage their own unique personality to it. Platforming wise, Alice Madness Returns fall a bit short with the level design of the game. Combat wise, the same item that you use for platforming is also used for combat, as each of them is mapped to a certain button. You have the Vorpal Blade, the Pepper Grinder, Teapot Cannon, Hobby Horse, and Clockwork Bomb. Each of these weapons got their own uses in combat, such as the Vorpal Blade's strength being in how quick it is, or the Hobby Horse attack being able to break the guard of an enemy, or the Clockwork Bomb being able to distract enemies, etc. And there's also Hysteria mode, which Alice activates when she's really in trouble, which will make her stronger and also invincible for a short amount of time. Basically, it's like a Berserker mode. Though, like the level design, the combat doesn't really change throughout the game, and that's mostly got to do with the enemy variety. There is a bit of enemy variety with each of the chapter, they're their own unique enemies, but each chapter there is the ruin enemy, which makes the battle a bit samey as they're in every chapter. That and the enemy AI pattern is pretty much the same for the peons, so there's really only enemy variety in the huge enemies that you encounter throughout the game in the combat. The lock-on system is a bit iffy too. There is also an upgrade system in Alice Madness Returns, but it only really amplified the weapon attack power and not really change how combat works. Overall, combat doesn't really change throughout the game, but it can be fun at times, but also can feel a bit samey with how long each individual chapters are. There are also some mini games you can play through the game when you're going through the stages, but those don't really last long, so they don't really balance out the platforming and combat. There are also a good amount of collectibles in the game, with bottles, memories, red paint, etc. Lengthwise, it took me 10 hours to complete the game, which is a decent length, though it's also the length of each chapter that kinda hurt the platforming and combat. If the chapters were a bit shorter in my opinion, then it could probably lessen the feeling of repetitiveness in the platforming and combat. That or create a more downtime London so we can take a few breathers between the stages. There's also one thing that I felt strange in the game, which is the lack of boss battles. I mean, there is a final boss in the game, but he's really the only boss in the game when you fight. It's odd because there were many points in the story that builds up to a boss at the stage, but the game didn't provide you with any. I don't think it's a con, but it's just a bit odd as they were building up the tension to a boss battle, but the game itself didn't provide you with one. The controls for keyboard and mouse is a bit wonky as well, but I use a gamepad and it works wonderfully. There's also a new Game Plus feature in the game, which will encourage you playing through the game, since there are collectibles you can miss when you're playing through the game for the first time. Overall, Alice Madness Returns is what I call a flawed gem. It got fantastic presentation, with great story, good characters, and phenomenal art style, but it's bogged down by the platforming and combat. The platforming and combat isn't bad by any means, but it just doesn't really change throughout the game, and with how long the chapter is, it really adds to how samey it feels when you're playing through it. But even with some of the issues with the platforming and combat, I really recommend the game. It's a very unique game. Its art style, story, and characters at least warrants a playthrough. I personally give this game a 7 out of 10. A game that has fantastic presentation, but its gameplay is what prevents it from being a great game.